We are live.
Hello,
Hi.
everybody.
What's up?
Hello.
Hello.
This is
Welcome.
the two sides of politics. Again.
As always. Yeah, I
What are
don't
we
think
doing
we
here?
didn't plan out that intro. Oh well.
We don't plan the intros. We don't.
No.
It adds to the charm
Yes.
of
All right.
an unfurled voice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, news today. We're talking capitalism. We're talking socialism, and we're joined by the Workers' Party Union laborist himself, Evan. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Later, don't talk me up too much.
Yeah. Right. No. But
How
welcome,
are you
Evan.
doing today, Evan? How are you doing today? Uh-oh.
Did we? Okay. Wonderful. We already lost him.
No. Wow. That was
was
fast.
fast.
I think
Wait, can you hear me now?
Okay,
Yes.
and he's
Yes, we
back.
can.
All right.
All right. Okay. I think I get it. I'm on my phone here, and I think if it locks out, it just shuts me out.
Yes.
Okay. That is good to know. We should.
Well, I guess now I know to keep my phone open.
Well,
Yes.
that helps.
Yeah. That explains
but how
a
you
lot
doing
when
today?
we were hanging out here. Huh?
How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty alright. I'm pumped. I got an 84 on my final today, so
Oh,
I'm
let's go. Which
riding off
one?
that dopamine.
Good for you.
Macroeconomics.
Nice.
I would get it. I would get like a 2 on that.
I thought I would get a 2 as well.
Well,
Um,
since you're in the mood to talk economics, this is
Yeah, right.
it's kind of
yeah, it's
fitting.
the perfect moment. Yeah.
right.
All right. What side are you on, Mr. Evan?
Well, as my introduction, I'm pretty sure it just locked out. All right, I'm watching this thing with my full vision. As my introduction, okay, obviously, as my introduction has shown, though, I'm a huge pinko communoid.
Oh, I see. There is nothing wrong with this, possibly. However,
Yeah.
as someone who has seen several socialist not companies, that would be a sight to behold.
Countries.
Countries kind of kick the bucket. I'm skeptical. Why should I trust this ideology that is so foreign to me?
Well, I would say because we got that's a weird way to pose the question. Let me think of a response. Well, I guess we have a lot to offer you, and those countries that are not doing so hot.
I love how you said we. That was
He
Oh,
represents
it is the
everyone.
most. It was half the way you said it, and half the most communist response you could have ever had. That was perfect.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that was great.
Okay.
I honk the horn, and now everyone's coming out to figure out why.
Well, yes, I guess we gotta ask you. Well, give us your pitch. You're talking to someone because obviously, if you've watched any of our podcasts at all, you know I'm a complete capitalist right wing person. John is somewhere closer to the middle and is oftentimes teetering back and forth between programs. So we ask you, Evan, if someone comes up to you and says, pitch it to me, what are you telling them?
I guess what I would go with is, look at what the fundamental structure of capitalism is. We have a bunch of people who control the means of production, and you might have heard that before. They're called capitalists. They own capital, and they use that capital to invest in the means of production, and they use that to control the means of production. And then there's a bunch of people called labor who don't own the means of production, and they have to work using the means of production and sell their labor to these capitalists to make the living that they need to live. And that's a fundamentally unfair power dynamic because you have
You got a point there.
yeah. These you need a worker needs a job to survive, but I mean, while a capitalist needs workers in his factory, he doesn't necessarily need you, and that gives him a lot of power that he can exploit in order to either give you unfair working conditions or one of the more basic things that I could list off as
Okay.
I
Now
think it's-
that would have been true for
I
like.
cut off. Oops.
It's okay.
Do you want to talk or do you want me to keep?
I would continue. Because
Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the most fundamental detriments I would give for capitalism is how if you work at I'm using a factory as an example. You guys were about to just say it's kind of an outdated system to look at, but I mean a factory worker produces like say $150 of something an hour, and then they get paid $15 an hour, and where that money goes, although all that money, that extra money doesn't go to the worker, it goes to the capitalists because they own the means of production and they make.
okay.
I cut off again, didn't I?
No,
alright,
you were
I gotta-
good there actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. If the workers had control of the means of production, they'd get all that money versus the capitalists taking a bunch of it because they're placed their rules, you know.
So what would you have to say to the risk that these investors at the top have in this company? Whereas if the company were to fail and completely, collapse, fall into bankruptcy, it does not fall on the backs of the workers, it falls on the backs of the capitalist investors, or I believe you called them, what the hell did you just call them?
No.
I
I call them capitalist investors, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In
would you
some
say to
smaller
them?
businesses. In some smaller businesses, that might be the case, but I mean, especially as bigger and bigger businesses come about, the government often bails out the companies at the expense of the worker.
Well, I mean,
So-
I would personally argue against that in the first place to begin with, but take a company like Ford or GM, who's constantly on the edge of bankruptcy. GM especially. I believe, I don't know if they're still in bankruptcy or not, but what would you say to something like that where you have these workers trying to get more money out of their job, but yet the company as a whole is submerging?
All right, so yeah, I guess what you mean is like these workers are like trying to get a higher wage where the company's sort of having trouble with its finances, right?
Right. Well, because I mean,
Right.
and I
corporate.
I know I'm going to bring this up again, but that goes into unions.
Yeah, it goes into unions and minimum wage and then all these things. Can you guys still hear me? I switched tabs so I could keep my phone
Yes.
open longer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, what I would say to that is that you can look at how much. I'll use minimum wage as an example. It makes like sort of intuitive sense that if you increase minimum wage, I mean that's a higher cost on the business, and they'll start trying to cut costs or something, or they might not be able to afford it.
Right.
But if
Or
you
raise
look in
prices.
yeah. If you look in practice, however, that doesn't usually happen. And if you take a step back and you look at it, these
In what
workers,
regards? Like,
they don't use like they usually use as an example of like they'd have to cut workers or cut costs and stuff like that. But that doesn't typically there isn't much unemployment after a raise in minimum wage. The only example of that I can think of.
oh, did he cut out?
I don't hear him anymore.
All right, you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi. Anyway, the only example I can think of where the minimum wage increase was followed by more unemployment was in 2009, which
Which is his,
probably,
that's
yeah,
Yeah, that's a very unique circumstance.
yeah, very unique
Now,
circumstance.
I'll talk in regards to, and John, I'll let you get in here in a minute.
Okay.
In regards to minimum wage, what do you have to say about, yes, a lot of employees don't get let go. That is obviously the pitch that a lot of people make. I would personally argue two things. I would argue, one, that the new person isn't going to get hired. So they're not going to hire another person. So yes, no one loses their job, but the younger people coming up behind them aren't getting those jobs. And secondly, I'll argue that raising the minimum wage raises the level of poverty, in turn putting more people in poverty, because these businesses do just raise their prices. People say, yes, people are going to lose jobs. No, just products and services costs go up. Perfect example. The McDonald's is a great example. I know in recent, they've tried to bring back, the dollar menu, but that has gone away and has come back, has shrunk. Prices at McDonald's and fast food restaurants across the board have gone up. And those are these big businesses that you're triumphing and trying to get money out of, which in turn is just raising the cost of living. And that goes across the board, from small business to big business. And you do have a lot of people, so in turn raising the minimum wage, yeah, it gives people more money, but it also puts people into poverty that weren't in poverty, because you're raising the level of poverty.
It does make sense that a minimum wage increase should be followed by an increase in prices, but it also loosens up a lot of where the money is. Like, it's not sitting in the hands of investors, it's going back into the workers, and those workers, they're not really sitting on it, they're going out and buying
yes, but now
with it.
instead of $1 for a cheeseburger, it costs $2. I mean, that's obviously exaggerated, but
Yeah.
overall, it doesn't help the worker, because the cost of living across the board has gone up. That's anywhere from food to groceries. Well, the grocery stores is food. Grocery stores to, clothing stores to miscellaneous items to, stores closing at the mall. And in fact, you would be bringing more people into poverty, because now these people that were making, say the minimum wage yearly salary was $15,000, right? Just for easy numbers. Say you raise the minimum wage and now that's 28. So that person that was making 25 and was getting by before is no longer getting by. You know what I'm saying? In which you're bringing more people into poverty.
It's true if in isolation, and that might happen in the.
But it happens across the board.
Year. Yeah, it might happen in the first the first year or so after a minimum wage increase, but
but that doesn't. Well, the idea of raising the minimum wage is to get people out of poverty, but if you're putting more people in poverty and people that are making minimum wage are still in poverty, you're not actually helping anyone.
It's like
You're
actually. Hold on.
The benefits
you have when you. Sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. I think I cut out again.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Well, the benefits of loosening up that money and having it in the there's a lot more money in the these hands of these workers, who they then go on and spend it on stuff, which that does sort of drive prices down a little bit with the I'm blanking on the word. Yeah, there were these even though the cost of production goes up a little bit more, the all the money being loosened up and being spent, and all the money circulating around, which was previously locked up in investments and stuff like that, that has an adverse effect to that, where it goes and it can drive prices back down. It can also allow these businesses to expand a little bit more.
Well, if you're taking money out of investments, the company isn't going to expand.
Sure, it can, because it's generating more money through profits of people
Yes, but it
consuming
also
the product.
costs more to run.
Like, it seems like the difference is just canceling itself out.
Correct.
Well, I mean, it does
If you
if the
take money from the corporation through any policy and try to give it back to the people, if the system in place is still to reward people for doing capitalism, then it just feeds capitalism. Like,
yeah,
the way I see it,
in a more complete like revolution of society, we wouldn't just be increasing the minimum wage.
oh, of course.
Yeah.
In a
but
socialist utopia.
Well, actually, that's funny that you say that, because like I was thinking about that earlier today. It's funny that this socialism is associated with utopia, because Karl Marx would, back before he was the big daddy of socialism and communism, he would like rail against the other contemporary communists at his time, like Fourier, for being utopians, and he would use that as like a dirty word against other communists, because like his outview, their outview.
Oh, he's gone.
Their outview.
Yeah, their outview of sorry, all right, sorry about that. I should switch that while someone else is talking. Their outlook on socialism and capitalism stuff was to, how can we like make a perfect society, and here's a bunch of things that we can get rid of or add that could make a better society, versus Karl Marx and his like ideological descendants, I guess. They just kind of looked at the problems in society and thought about how they could solve these problems without they didn't really have any illusions that they would create a perfect society, and a lot of the time they admitted that they would probably create more problems, but these are solutions to the current problems that we'd have, and you get the point.
Well, I would personally argue that is still a utopia, because what they fundamentally, the problem, they have a problem. Not everyone has the same solution. Socialism relies on the idea that everyone wants the same thing, and that everybody wants healthcare. Well, actually, there are people that don't actually want healthcare. We say out there, and we say, well, that's just ridiculous. Well, it's true. There are people on this planet that think killing is okay. There are people on this planet that think we shouldn't have healthcare, or don't want healthcare, and that goes across the board. So when you say socialism and you say the greater good of all from government ran this, right? There's some people that don't want that, and America, being the protectorate of the right of the minority, has to respect that. So when you come out and you say, well, Medicare for all makes sense because we're providing everyone health care. Well, not everybody wants health care, and not everyone wants their health care ran by the government. So yes, maybe 51% want it, okay, but the other 49% don't. And the idea of a republic, and what this country is founded upon, is the right of the minority not infringed by the rule of the majority. So in turn, if you were to implement socialism, it's almost un-American, because it's what the country was founded upon. It's un-American. And I don't mean that as in, like, all forms of socialism are bad. They say socialism is in roads, right? Which I understand, and that makes sense. But our roads are very shitty and are not taken care of well. Do you want your health taken care of by that? And I mean, I'm getting into government socialism versus like the means of production and workers' rights and stuff like that, which I think you're more of an advocate of. I don't know what your stance is on Medicare
probably.
for all. So I guess honestly, you're probably more of a communist than and I don't mean that derogatorily, as in like you believe more in, the factory rights versus, Medicare for all. I don't know what your stance is on that, but.
Well, I mean, I guess if you ask 10, if you were to ask 10 socialists what the definition of socialism is, you'd probably get 11 different answers. So it's kind of hard to say, yeah, it's true, but
No, it is. No,
you can't really,
you're 100% right. Because I mean,
yeah,
they say that with a lot of things in government. Like like Bernie Sanders, democratic socialism, but then describes Sweden and Denmark, which have more of a freer capitalist economy than we do. So, you know,
yeah. And,
uh, so when you talk about it, are you a socialist communist? I guess in my eyes, and what my definition would be workers' rights. The Workers' Party, hammer and sickle, or are you more of a greater good, Medicare for all, that kind of socialist?
Well, I don't think either of them are really good terminology, but I guess I'd
Yeah,
say the former. Yeah, I know what you mean though, and I guess I would say the former. However, me and other people who I guess think like me, they aren't. They don't think that the sort of Medicare for all socialism is like the end all be all solution to our problems, but it can sort of help in the very, very short term, I guess. Because I mean, if you have people who can't afford health care, I mean, what's up with that? Yeah, it's not. You're not going to solve all the injustices of the world by doing Medicare for all, but until we can have a more equitable economy, it can help a little bit. But then again, there are also plenty of them who don't believe that. Either they believe, like all or nothing, or they believe in sort of like accelerationism, where if you give it to them, give someone like Medicare for all, they'll become complacent in capitalism with just some like commodities, I guess. From the government.
the life of mediocrity.
Well, I mean that goes to just titles. Because I mean, I classify myself as a constitutionalist, libertarian, Republican, but I'm pro-gay marriage, so which is not necessarily popular on the right. So, and that's why you need to talk to people in the sense, well, I could call you a communist, and then you're like, whoa, 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 and I don't believe in this, I believe in that, and this idea of labeling people have obsessions with labeling people and classifying people. It's just wrong. We're all individuals. We all have different thoughts, processes. Just because you believe, you're not going to necessarily believe everything I say, or agree with me on everything I say. So I think that there does come down to, and I guess especially in socialism, because it is heavily regarded as the big evil. Definitely in the prior century and decades. But
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you have to say to that?
Well, what I was thinking is I completely agree. I think labels are unhelpful. I mean, especially when it comes to something like socialism, where like nobody can even agree what the hell it even is, or even to an extent capitalism. Because I mean, if socialism and capitalism are antithetical, if you don't know what socialism is, then you don't really know what capitalism is either. Or there's a bunch of stuff in politics where nobody even really truly agrees with on what something even like what a label even means, let alone what's right or wrong.
Well, I mean, I think, and going back to the political labels, I mean, saying that the definition of capitalism. I mean, are there full capitalists out there and full socialists out there? Yeah, but there are some people that believe in some socialism. I guess it goes down to the percentages of, 80-20, 90-10, 50-50, 60-40, and like what people believe that we should follow. I think we also have to recognize that both socialism and capitalism have to do with economics. And so when you talk about it, what we are is what you're the 51% of. So if you are a 60-40 capitalist, socialist, you are a capitalist country. If you're an 80-20 socialist capitalist, you're a socialist you're a socialist country. And it's basically whatever you're the 51% of. Now, I don't this goes back to the Medicare for all and jumping to saying, "Oh, you're a socialist. Oh, you must believe in Medicare for all." No, that's obviously not true. So it becomes, what do you actually believe in okay, and I know you, Evan, so you're more of a workers' right type, and I said that earlier. So type socialist of workers' rights, Which, I mean, can you even classify that as socialism or more just I mean, that's just what you call yourself, right?
Well, while he's coming back.
Hello.
Hello.
Did I cut out again?
Yeah.
What a good episode, huh? I didn't say anything of value while I was cut out, so it's okay. Regarding what Jack just said, though, it sort of comes down to nobody can even agree what socialism is. And I mean, yeah, you can look at something like Vladimir Lenin and what I was about to say, what the difference between socialism and communism is, where you have Vladimir Lenin, who thought that there was a very distinct difference between socialism and communism, and then you have Karl Marx, who used them literally interchangeably, like they're the exact same thing.
Which isn't. Yeah. That's
Well,
not
I
true.
mean, I always. Well, I had the famous backwards quote of you can't have communism without socialism. So
Right, but if my very primitive geometry skills do not fail me, a square is not a rectangle.
No, it is.
Well, no, a square is a rectangle.
Yes, classified as a rectangle.
Wait.
I think you're trying to describe something like.
Yeah, I know. I think I know what it means.
I know what you're trying to
Is
do.
it the other way around? Is it a rectangle is not a square?
Yes.
Yeah, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
Communism is the rectangle.
No, socialism is the rectangle. Communism is the square.
Okay. To me, communism was born from socialism. So it must be...
It was born on the backs of, yes.
So it must be similar and a evolution of it.
Sure, but I mean, if you look at when I said I like Karl Marx, he didn't make any distinction at all, or Lenin, who believed that socialism was the trans. Oh Jesus, you guys hear me? Oh my God.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna put my phone here because what actually happened there is my belly touched it and switched tabs on me. Yeah. Anyway, what Lenin said was he sort of thought that socialism was baby communism, like it's the transition between capitalism and communism. And that quote that Jack said, I believe that either it's a paraphrasing of what Lenin said or it's based off of what Lenin said, where he said that socialism is the beginnings of communism, I guess. But then again, also words are made up, and I would appeal to them as authorities on what socialism and communism are. But so many people think that so many people say that Bernie Sanders is a socialist. That, I mean, does that make him one? I mean, words are made up and they're determined by their usage. So if enough people say socialism, that is what socialism is, then does that become true?
I mean, personally, I would classify Bernie Sanders as a communist in the sense that I don't think he's all about just healthcare. I do think there is part of him that believes there should be government control. You can't come out and praise Fidel Castro and not say you're pro-government, authority.
Yeah.
And I guess that just comes down to the authoritarian versus the libertarian left. in the sense that, or the far left, let me rephrase that, in that personally I would think that socialism is a less authoritarian view than
Right, because
communism.
How does communism work without the government like
Forcing
being
you, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean that's also that's also another way you could describe the distinction between socialism and communism. But there's sort of, at least nowadays, there's sort of two main groups of communists, where there's anarchists and there's Marxist Leninists.
Yeah.
So that
They,
would like be the libertarian philosophical versus the not libertarian really, but the libertarian direction in
Yeah, I
the
get it.
philosophical versus the authoritarian.
But they sort of have the same end goal, which is, I'm going off of what John said, where how do you have communism without sort of government control? The idea is that it's kind of libertarian in a sense, because part of the definition of communism, especially by what Karl Marx gave, is that it has no government. Like, if you have a government, it's not communist yet. But the way that they sort of dismantle capitalism without the government is that I don't even really, because
so are you saying that the USSR never made it to full communism?
Yeah, in a sense, but if you were to say, "Oh, that's not the USSR is not real communism," that's kind of missing the point, because they were trying to work.
No, I know, I get that, but wouldn't
Yeah.
that be a utopia?
No, not even, because it's just an end. It's a state of society that they believe is better, but it's not necessarily a perfect one, because it'll have its own problems.
Yeah, but
just
that's still a utopia.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about definitions and stuff. What is a utopia? Because
I would argue a utopia is an end goal of a society.
Then sure, under that definition, it would be a utopia. But I would define a utopia as a sort of pristine, perfect, flawless society, where which it clearly wouldn't be.
You wouldn't even be able to categorize a utopia under a certain economic.
Well, because think in the
system.
United States there were many utopias early on. They're very less common now. Of religious utopias in which their society collectively believed all the same things. I would argue that communism tried to do the same thing. Whether they came out and said, no, we're not trying to get a utopia because, things won't be perfect, but I guess it comes down to being a more perfect, and I know that's an American phrase, but I guess in the end that's kind of the goal, a more perfect union. More perfect society. More perfect society, sure, not union.
Yeah, and I guess under that sort of idea of what a utopia is, it would sort of fit in. And I sort of got myself off topic. Anyway, the sort of main distinction between these sort of Marxist-Leninists and anarchists is how they want to transition, and it sort of goes back to 1871, but I'm not going to go into that. Or the Marxist-Leninists, they're like the Soviet unions of communism, where they want to set up a one-party state, not necessarily like a dictatorship, but it's a one-party state, and the idea is that way foreign governments don't come in and try to undo the revolution. Because I'll go back into the history. I said I wouldn't, but I will. There was a revolution, or a failed revolution, in France in 1871 during the Franco-Prussian War, where the French military was distracted losing the war against the Germans, and so the people of Paris, they rose up and they overthrew the government, and then the French government, not really deposed, because outside of Paris it still kind of existed, because it didn't last very long. The French government and foreign governments, they all came in and swooped in and shut that stuff down, and they killed like a bunch of people in Paris, and it was kind of really horrible, and it only lasted 72 days. But that sort of caused the divide within the movement of communism, where you have Marxist-Leninists, where they want to set up a one-party state to prevent that from ever happening, and they have anarchists where they don't necessarily want to do that. Their goal is more to take the issues on one at a time, and not have a sort of sweeping revolution. And they're also, and it's not like the anarchist side. It's not like the anarchist version of communism. Like that is who anarchists are. It sort of evolved out of that. And there are other forms of anarchism that might not fit neatly into communism, like mutualism, but the sort of anarchist movement evolved from there.
The thing about communism, at least to me, is that it completely disincentivizes having a purpose. Because in the worst case scenario, you become part of the state. And then the people who run the state are the people who have the purpose. This is the worst. Like, that's the bad part about it when you have government involved in the communism. Because then your society boils down to what's on the agenda for top dog today. And
right,
I can't get...
Well, I mean, what's the difference between that and capitalism? Because it's instead of the top dog being the guy who's running the government, it's the top dog is the guy who employs you.
Well, there are multiple employers. True. There's multiple employers. There's only one government.
Yeah. You have options in a capitalist
if you do not like a company, and especially now this is more prevalent than ever, and this is why I think, you know, if there was a socialist movement, and I know there was back in the 1920s when, you know, there were more factories. I think what are we down to, like, I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's around like
60% service economy.
I'm sorry, say again. I didn't hear that.
I think we're around like a 60% service economy.
I thought it was higher.
No, because we still have a lot of like people with in regards to energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a service.
It's okay, but labor's a service if you make it like that.
Well, I'm just saying. No. I'm saying like we're at the point where you need skills to be a construction worker. There's not a lot of unskilled labor jobs yet left. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like a factory. There's not many factory jobs left. But, I mean, we talk about service jobs. Okay, yeah, but, you know, then you're talking about, construction workers. But the problem is now you need a degree to be a construction worker. So, you know what I'm trying to say here? So you're not going to, that's not a deplorable. We're talking about people who are, in the eyes of, not necessarily in the eyes of Hillary Clinton, deplorables. But we're talking about the people that are in jeopardy every day, no matter the risk, or no matter the skill. And I don't see a prevalence of those jobs. Because if you go down the line and you say, well, a construction worker is a quote-unquote at-risk, unskilled worker, well, that's just kind of false, because we're at the point where there's so many regulations and so many, aspects of construction now that you actually do have valuable skill that they're just not going to let many people walk. And if they do, they're going to another construction company. If a factory person gets let go, they get let go. Now, obviously, that's not as prevalent, where we live, and that's obviously more prevalent, in the food packing industry and, way back when in Detroit. But if you do increase regulation and drive up the cost, it's going to be them moving to different countries.
Yes.
In the sense that I don't remember where I was going with that point, but I do.
Okay.
My point being is that moving to a full, a based non-service economy is absurd, because we do have a service economy. So
yeah, we don't. I'm not saying we should move to a non-service economy. That would be.
I would argue that's what socialism is.
Right, like everyone needing to have, because in the Soviet Union,
if I sell
everyone
a car,
had a job.
If I sell a car, and the three of us work at a car salesman, a shop. If I sell a car, I don't want to give you people my paycheck. I sold that car. Now, if we're talking about working at a factory, that's a little different. But we're at the point in the United States where many of those jobs are irrelevant. Let me rephrase that. Are non-factors in the sense that where these factories are, there aren't many people anyways, and a lot of these people are realizing that these unions that they relied on years ago are actually screwing them over, and these jobs are picking up and leaving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, what do you think socialism is? Because it's not when, the
Well,
government comes in. It's not.
I was trying to argue against what you were saying in the sense that we need to have more workers' rights. Look, unions have the interest of the individual. And to an individual, that sounds great, right? But the problem is the individual needs to have the interest of the company because they need a living too.
Yeah,
and you say that, they're in control. No one today is in control of their job. And I know Jeremy is going to get mad at me for saying this. But if it is at the point where it is that bad, you can get up and move. Now, I know Jeremy is probably hitting himself in the head right now, thinking, oh God, he said it again. It doesn't work like that. Jeremy, I can hear you screaming at me, okay?
Yeah, he texted me in Animal Crossing. Oh my God. That's crazy. He's freaking out.
Oh, hold on. Oh, we lost Evan again. Evan?
In the meantime,
Hi.
Okay. Hi. In the meantime,
when did I cut off?
Jack doesn't. You didn't. Yeah, the last thing that was said was that you can get up and move, and we're making fun of Jeremy because he will get upset about it. Jack doesn't literally mean get up and move to another country. He means move far enough to take the opportunity.
There are jobs in different places. The problem is people need to get up and go to them.
If you live in New York City,
yes, jobs are scarce. You go to upstate New York, jobs are plentiful. What I'm saying is when you move to a service economy, there needs to be less population density, because then everyone's fighting for the same jobs. And where you saw the rise of cities in the factory base, and I'll call it factory base. I forget the practical. Is it consumer base? No.
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing. Thank you. Why could I not think of it? Where manufacturing needed to all be together, service needs to be spread apart. So you do see these cities that have a lot of poverty because there's a lot of competition, and in which you can lower competition and better yourself by moving to somewhere where there's not. And now I have a feeling what you're going to say is, yes, we need less competition to increase wages, but you need a real drop in competition, not a manufactured, no pun intended, drop in competition, because you also do need the prices to stay low. And I brought this up on Tuesday with our healthcare talk with Jeremy. We say, and socialists say, not we, I don't say this, Democrats and socialists say that the government has the interests of the people. And the government wouldn't want to.
I wouldn't call Democrats socialists.
Well,
I have no.
Yes, no. But I'm just classifying them as people that would say this. That government has the interest of the people, and government can make things better for the people. The problem is our government is so big that and so corrupt, even at the top, with these lifetime politicians and these unelected officials, that corruption in interests of the public is no longer fundamentally upheld by the government. You can say it till your grave. The United States government, in its current form, as it is growing, is becoming more corrupt in every single day it grows. And simply moving to a socialist economy and socialist-based programs creates bigger government, and in the eyes of the United States, becoming more corrupt, giving up civil liberties. Now, we can get into a debate about liberties, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I do not need to be giving up my rights, paying high taxes for the greater good of all, health care. Look, anyone can go down to a hospital and get care. They will not turn you away. How it comes to paying that, we get a little different. And I know we're moving back into Medicare for all at this point, but
honestly, it's because the workers, socialism was born in a time where
workers needed rights.
Different. Yeah, they needed.
And that's where I would say, unions had a job. Today, I would argue things like teachers' unions and government unions are simply to fuck over the government. And to squeeze every freaking dollar they can get out of it. Which is not right for the taxpayer, because government won't run out of money. Yes, they are out of money, yes, but that's not what I mean. You'll get a paycheck no matter what. And that goes for school teachers and yada, yada, yada. But what I'm saying is, and this is why I don't want government control, is because when things go to hell in a business, it goes bankrupt, right? The government,
or at least in your ideal, what happens normally is when things go nose up, the government bails them out. But I wouldn't say that you.
Well,
support that.
I definitely, being a libertarian, do not support government bailing out business, and I think that's part of the corruption. And I think you could get rid of that and create transparency by shrinking the government. But simply the government controlling the means of production. I always go back to a thing I saw in which I like living in a capitalist society. I can go out to the grocery store and buy whatever I need, whatever I want, whenever I want. And the next day, if they're all gone, they're restocked. In a socialist, communist country, the government decides what's best for me, what I do, and what I should get. I want to make those determinations. And I go back to this again. And we can argue the ethics of the good and bad of socialism versus capitalism in a vacuum, or we can look at it in the American sense, in which I would say socialism is un-American, because you don't have the liberty to do the job you want, or buy the food you want, or go to the place you want, because the government picks for you. Now, I get it as like a collective greater for all, but we should not be products of the state. We should not be fulfilling the interests of government. We should be fulfilling our own interests. That's the idea of freedom. And by giving up those interests for the collective good, even on a small scale as far as healthcare, we are giving up our individual liberties to do and to make decisions for our own. And that's why I would consider socialism and capitalism un-American. Again, we can debate the ethics in a vacuum, in which, in a vacuum, I guess full capitalism would work, and in a vacuum, full socialism would work. Again, creating utopias. But we do not live in a utopia, and we do not live in these other countries where these principles are held true. Not many other countries value, freedom as much as we do. Now, yes, countries do have freedoms, and people say, oh, many other countries have freedoms. Yes, but they don't hold them to the values that we do in the idea of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But in America, I don't think socialism will work. I don't think we should ever come to that point. In a vacuum, again, different debate. In a different country, it's a different debate. And I also hate the argument that people make where they say, and I said this yesterday, where, we're the richest country in the world, but we don't provide basic, what they consider rights or, necessary for survival. Rights as far as housing and healthcare. Maybe that's why we're the richest country in the world, because we didn't do that. Just because you declare something a right doesn't make it any better. Just because you say you deserve a good income doesn't help your case. It doesn't help your life. Let me rephrase that. Putting government in control, and especially the United States government, has never panned out. Obamacare, a mess. Today, Social Security is sinking faster than the Titanic.
When I learned that Social Security was responsible for the United States, the majority of the United States federal debt, I was mad, to say the least.
You realize only under... Sorry, Evan, I cut you off.
No, it's actually the U.S. military spending. That's it's about 51% of the budget, or at least it was in 2017.
Well, I mean, we can point fingers at any program and say, well, it was transportation. They're the T, or, it's the program that starts with a Z. I mean, we can point at literally any program. Saying that it was one program over the other is irrelevant. It's one budget. What has put ourselves in bankruptcy is the overspending of government. That's true. Has been what puts us in debt. It's not one program over the other. Actually, Social Security was profitable until Clinton left. I believe Clinton was the last year it was profitable. And actually, Clinton was the only president in the last 100 years to have 4 budget surpluses.
That was crazy.
So, I don't point fingers at one program. I think collectively, if the government wanted to get out of debt, they could very easily.
That's a good take.
Because they could just stop spending. They simply don't. Now, I know we're a little off capitalism, socialism, but it's all relevant in the idea of economics. But when you say socialism, I hear government grows. I know you're talking on the basis of a socialist company, but the problem is look at Facebook, right? Or any major company. I'm going to use Facebook as or should I use Amazon? I'll use Facebook. I'll use Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg was part of a small group that created Facebook. All right? All the people today, yes, are part of what make Facebook run today. Yes. Right? You can make that argument. But they did not create Facebook. They did not take the risk. They did not start the program. They would not be there if it wasn't for Mark Zuckerberg. And that goes on the basis of every company.
Well,
Amazon.
I want to cut you off here because, I mean, are you super confident that if Mark Zuckerberg wasn't around, that nobody would have invented Facebook? I think Amazon's a better example than Facebook because, I mean, Amazon's really not all that complicated of a concept. It's literally a website.
Yes, but it was the person that went out and took the risk.
There are hundreds of others.
Yes, but they didn't. They didn't. Jeff Bezos did. Just like Bill Gates and Microsoft. Just like Steve Jobs and Apple. You say, well, Someone had to create it. Thomas Edison created the light bulb. They don't give the credit to anyone else. That's what I'm saying. Yes, the company grew with other people, but it was that initial person that took the risk, took the gander, and went for it. That was what created the company. Just going out and saying, well, someone would have created the light bulb, you can't say that because you don't know.
Yeah, it's not possible to tell.
Well, I mean, I think Thomas Edison's a great example of this, because Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb. Someone else did, and he stole the credit. Just because he owned not Tesla. He hired a worker at his company, invented the light bulb, and he stole the credit. We don't know his name. We just know that Thomas Edison just kind of sat on top of the company while a bunch of other people invented hundreds of things that he stole the credit for.
Yes, but someone had to invest in it. If they didn't have the money to research, in a sense, or invent or create, they wouldn't have ever created the light bulb.
Well, I mean, we under capitalism, we have hundreds of millions of people who don't have the money to invest in these ideas. I mean,
right, that's why you need the rich people.
Even if Jeff Bezos, for example, was super big brain boy and nobody else could have, even if he was super big brain boy and nobody else could have come up with the idea of a website that you buy things on. I mean, how many other millions of people would have been able to come up with something even better, but they just, they aren't being fed, or they can't afford a home. And
well, okay,
they didn't because they can't.
They didn't have the opportunity because
there are plenty of opportunities to start businesses.
You don't understand what he means. They don't have the opportunity because their resources need to be filed elsewhere. Bezos was likely a middle-class citizen by the time that he started Amazon, if not even higher up on the class.
No.
That's why you have investors. That's why you have people.
Not gonna. If you're homeless, worried about where you're gonna have your next meal, you're not even thinking up these things because you're thinking up where you're gonna get your next meal.
Well, you're not gonna jump from the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder. You have to climb.
But
I mean, the idea is there shouldn't be a ladder. All these inventions that have improved our society, like Amazon. I don't like Amazon the company or Jeff Bezos, but I mean a service where I'm deriding it because it's so simple, but it's convenient that we have a website where you can buy things. But I mean,
they make life better.
Yeah. And there's all these hundreds of millions of people who, if they were fed and clothed and had homes and stuff, they would easily be thinking of even more crazy opportunities that we just aren't getting because, I mean, our economy is oriented toward getting a bunch of rich perverts more money.
Well, I mean, that comes down to saying,
what if?
That's a what if statement. That's a what if statement in the sense that, well, you don't know what's going to happen. Yes, exactly. You don't know what's going to happen. But what do you have to say to someone like Jeff Bezos, who I believe has single-handedly, with Amazon, decreased inflation and decreased the cost of living with his product and service? Think of how Steve Jobs revolutionized what we carry around in our pockets. Or I'm not aware of who started Samsung, but think of what they did for us and the opportunities they led to us afterwards. Simply standing in the dark and saying, well, this is what it is, we need to keep running with it. That is degrading the evolution of the future and change overall.
Well, I mean, even if these guys are such huge people and they're such big boys that they deserve. I mean, I think they probably do deserve a reward for their actions. But think of all the other millions of people who could have also done something if they weren't worried about where their next meal was going to come from.
Actually, I saw an article. The CEO of Walmart makes around $27 million a year. If you were to divide that out to every Walmart employee, it would be a couple dollars. I don't think socialists realize even Jeff
it's not about dividing
Bezos.
up the money.
No. But
Not about
even Jeff Bezos, like, you know, they say, oh, his net worth. Oh, you know, he doesn't have $100 billion in the bank. That's not how it works. Like, I don't think people understand that a lot of companies, even big ones, make it by the skin on their teeth, especially small ones. So when you come in here and you say, we're going to take it over and we're going to force you to do certain things, it degrades the business and actually promotes big business, because these small ones that are gasping for air even more than these big ones are going under due to the regulation impressed by government. You're actually destroying capitalism, which has gotten more people out of poverty than any other system in the world.
Well, actually, the more people out of poverty statistic, that comes from the, I think, I forget what thing it is, what the organization is called.
But it's
they
true.
Sort of track world. No, they track world poverty in every country, and they have an aggregate thing, and that's where the statistic that capitalism has taken more people.
You know, people in poverty in the United States would be in the middle class in most of these other countries.
Well, what I'm saying is this company, or it's not a company, it's an organization, because they're not making profits. They have to obviously adjust their metric of what poverty is for inflation every couple or so years, and they take a little bit off. They keep lowering it, and they adjusting for inflation. It keeps getting lowered and lowered, and nothing's actually really changing. Wages across, not just in the United States, across the world, haven't changed since the 70s, despite productivity, like, I think, quadrupling.
But yeah, is this the spending power chart?
I don't look at statistics. I'm going to be frank with you. I do not look at statistics very often. Frankly, I don't care. Statistics aren't real life. When we talk about sports,
bad take.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that.
Bad take. Bad
no.
take. All right.
No, wait a minute.
No. All right, listen. Statistics are an observation of real life data. You cannot ignore them.
Yes, but
the only reason we know how many coronaviruses.
Statistics are not real people. It's a representation of people. Oh. Yes, but when you look at it,
this is where Phil. Okay, go ahead.
When you look at it in the world of sports, and you say, "Well, this guy hits, 27% against left, 27% against left-handers in this situation, and blah 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 blah." Yes, and you play your odds. Yes, but at the same time, you have to trust the man in the sport to get the double, to get the run, to get the hit, to get the whatever. Yes, I just saw the census pop up. Yes, we do look at statistics. Yes, people do. But we, as a collective country and a collective group, have to look at the people behind the numbers, is what I'm saying. And when you say, oh, well, blacks are more likely to be in poverty. Well, and then say, well, we need to do something for the entirety of the black community. That's assuming that all black people, or giving preference to that all black people are in poverty. You see what I'm saying? You have to look at the individual behind it, in the sense that when we look at statistics and we get down to the nitty-gritty and we say, well, that's not actually true, and we start talking about, like, inflation and numbers and all that, that's why when I make an argument, I don't use statistics. Because then it becomes, and this is the point I was getting at.
Yeah, you point at people.
When, this is what I was talking about, this is what I was trying to get to. It becomes a debate on numbers, and people, even though counted in a census, are more than just numbers. You actually,
of course,
this will be an interesting way to put it. You hear streamers talking about it when they connect with their community, and they say, wow, it's more than just a view count, in which they see the number, but they don't realize the people behind it. So when I make an argument, I don't come out here and say, well, 45% of people and this and that. And I don't come out here and I say, yep, this is, mathematically equations, because life isn't a mathematical equation. When you go through life, not everything is perfect. That's why communism failed, because all these mathematical equations that set the price and set the line of production in the minimum needed to survive, it fell short because you didn't account for human. And we most often refer to it as human error. But in the case of making money and moving forward as society, it's human desire. If you get up every day and know that no matter how hard you work, you're going to get the same paycheck. No one is going to get up and work hard. If you get up every morning and think, I can work harder to better my life and put myself in a better situation than I was yesterday, people will get up and work harder. The problem with socialism, it de-incentivizes people to want to work harder. It de-incentivizes the progress of society forward. If people don't have a reason to get up in the morning, they won't do it. Now, maybe not in your eyes, but in the eyes of most other hard-working, desiring to work workers. I mean, look at it now. Look at the news now. You have people dying to get back to work. All these people are dying to get back to work.
I think that's less because they have ambitions and more because they want to eat.
I think that's because they're on the verge of starvation.
Yeah,
right. But
I understand
when you move forward and you get past that stage, it becomes what's next in life. Is it the bigger house? Is it the new car? Is it the boat? And right now, yes, you're at the basis of food. Yes, that's why people want to get back to work. But when you get past that and you do have a normal situation, you do have the people that work harder to move up to make their life better. And socialism doesn't allow that.
All right. I'm going to destroy both of you. Here is the take. Socialism doesn't work as an economics. It just doesn't. Because of what Jack just said, it disincentivizes ambition.
No. Socialism is not when the government controls the economy. It's not when, to quote Karl Marx. No, it's not.
But what were all the formulas? What were all the formulas that were written out to determine price, determine cost, to determine salary?
I don't know.
But that's what it was.
Let me.
Soviet Union, really.
That's what it was.
Let me talk.
Sorry.
No, socialism is not when socialism is not when the government does stuff, and it's also communism. Part of the predication of communism.
You're talking about corporate socialism.
What? Corporate socialism isn't a thing. Socialism is when the I can't hear you.
He's not talking.
I'm not talking.
Well, anyway.
I think my phone's overheating.
Yo. What I was, huh?
All
right, you go.
All right.
I want priority after this though, because I haven't gotten talked at all.
Go for it.
What it comes down to though is that socialism. We have a lot of media and stuff where people are just given a bad idea of what socialism even is. It's not when the government controls
propaganda.
It's neither is communism. Socialism is when the workers have full control over the means of production, distribution, and services within the economy, and the goods are distributed based upon who needs it and not necessarily who needs it. We're worried about who's dying and stuff, but like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like we're fulfilling you know what I mean. giving people.
I'm a
We're not
humongous
giving
fan of
people yachts while people are
self-actualization.
starving.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I'll ask you one question to build on that.
Yeah.
How do those workers get those rights?
I guess there's the bunch of disagreements between different communists is. I guess the answer is that's the fundamental question, isn't it? There's a bunch of different people who have a bunch of different beliefs on how to do that. There's syndicalists who believe we're going to make one big workers union and we're all going to go on strike until we start to get our way. That's a massive oversimplification. Then there's Marxist-Leninists who believe that we're going to have a vanguard party who's going to dismantle capitalism over a couple decades. Then you have anarchists who want to take on one problem at a time and remove the authority from that problem. There's a bunch of other people too. Like there's mutualists. That's the fundamental question. I mean, since we haven't dismantled capitalism, we can't find the objective answer to that yet. And that's
okay. And so for someone that doesn't know what socialism is, when people dance around that question and say, "Oh, I really don't have an answer for that," they're just going to assume it's government because that's what it's always been. So
That's what I was just about to say. Yeah.
That's what communism's always been, or that's just what they're used to. Because,
but no one is going to throw out a system that's working for the majority of people to throw at something.
The majority of people?
Yes.
We have a ton of people who are working their ass off to struggle. They're struggling to pay rent, and they're working their ass off. We have you go bankrupt from going to the hospital.
Anyone can go to the hospital.
That doesn't fix the bill, though.
Yeah.
It will get covered by government. No one will be denied health care if they go to an hospital today, tomorrow, tonight, whenever.
I mean, just have even fundamentally, you just have people who are struggling to pay rent and for food and their water
Maybe
bill.
It's because of the other financial choices they make.
Not always.
All right, here's the take. All right, hold on. This is the perfect opportunity for me to spiel.
Yeah.
All right, listen.
John's turn.
In its rawest form, socialism doesn't work in America. In smaller areas, it does. It works in Norway or Scandinavia. It works in Scandinavia. It works in Vermont. It works in places where it is small enough to manage the resources easily. However, big socialism fails. And the reason is because not everyone is on the same page, and they never will be. In regards to socialism and that's in regards to economic socialism. However, social programs can exist. And this is why compromise is very important. A few episodes back, me and Jack have been developing this thing where if we had to provide health insurance from the government, it would be on the state level instead of the federal level.
It's why Romney Care works and Obamacare doesn't. Same thing exactly, but one is only the state of Massachusetts and one is the entire country. Sorry. People
on a state level have a more similar demographic than on a federal level. It is much easier to say that people in Massachusetts are in similar situations across the state than it is to say everyone in the United States. Implementing socialism on this level may actually succeed. However, you cannot do it in a massive scale because it is, again, too big. You cannot assure unemployment let's take the example of people struggling for rent. Unless they meet a certain benchmark of poverty, they cannot be helped because they're still in the zone of you're not so screwed that you're like it's impossible. Some measure could be taken. However, for anyone below that, they should receive help. But to do this, they need government. Because there is no one in our society who would willingly hand over money unless it was for charity, and there's like 7 people who do that in large numbers.
A lot of
And that's
people
the thing.
donate. A lot more people donate to charity than you think.
Well, no,
Yeah,
I
and
mean
that's
like versus $20 versus 20 million.
Well, Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos donated $10 billion to climate change, but
There's only one Jeff Bezos.
yeah, I know, but $10 billion is a lot of money.
You're missing the point. What I'm saying.
No, I get what your point is. I get that.
Yeah, all right.
I'm just saying there are more
I'm
charitable people.
not.
than you think.
I'm not denying that charity is a big deal. Like people do donate. Lots of them do, but to the scale that is necessary to help these people, it just doesn't exist. So, regulating the extremes. This is my strategy.
Oh god.
Help the poor people with government. They need assistance to help to get out of their hellhole life. Now, here's the problem. Right now, programs don't work because when they're dependent on the programs all the way through the journey. They will rely on unemployment until they are making way more. People on unemployment, I feel like don't change jobs because they're getting government assistance and they're like, oh, okay, I could put the assistance into my budget, but you can't. That's not the real budget. Because that's not a permanent solution. It goes away. So these people need to be heavily monitored by the state, like a drug dealer level. They need to be guided out of poverty until a point where they can be let off of assistance permanently and not actually fall back in. This, I feel like, would help more than any current program.
John, you had me nervous at first, and then you continued your point, and I was like, okay, yeah, because, and I guess I'll continue on that. In the sense is if you are propping people up and then pulling the floor out from under them, they're going to fall. But if you let them build the floor under them, they won't fall.
Right.
In the sense that no one will outpace themselves in the sense that they're biting off more than they can chew at a time.
Yeah.
Yes.
As for the rich, it is not fair, no matter how much you hate the rich, to take away their money.
Correct.
In a large amount. They earned it. They earned it as much as anyone earns their money. However, I understand the need to pull finances from the private sector back into the system. But it needs to happen in a different way. Taxes, perhaps some regulation on literally how much your net worth can be. That could possibly happen because when you're one guy, and Jack, I know you said that corporations do live on the skin of their teeth, but that would be a different level than what I'm about to propose. If you're a Jeff Bezos level human being, you don't need all your money to handle your company. There is a surplus. The surplus, perhaps 80% of the surplus, should be removed so that it can be funneled back into the government so that it can do government things, not to the poor, because that doesn't work. Robin Hood he's not real. Can we just talk about how Robin Hood, who's seen the Disney Robin Hood with the foxes? And
I haven't. I actually haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No.
That fox is a communist. And he's awesome. But he's a communist.
Communism is not when you take from the rich and give to the poor. It has to do with the power structures of who's in power in
government.
Economy.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
No, not
I misunderstood.
In communism, there is no government.
Then how do you
that's what I'm saying. When you say, oh, there's no government in communism, then what the fuck was Stalin? What the fuck was Lenin?
That's the idea of what the Soviet Union was. It's not even what they were trying to do. What the Soviet Union was the transition between capitalism and socialism.
And Stalin screwed it up.
Yeah, in a sense, but there are also people who believe that Stalin didn't screw it up. I'm not about to defend Stalin because he did a ton of horrible shit. However, he did take Russia from a backwater agrarian shithole
Yeah, that's true.
into world power.
I will.
He
Yeah,
also killed a bunch of people, but I mean,
I misunderstood communism again, but it's complicated. But
yeah.
now that I understand it better, people aren't good enough to do this. I have been on like a philosophical tantrum lately where people are just not strong enough to make a utopia possible. There will always be a flawed society. It will always exist because everyone is
that's
strong.
why socialism doesn't aim to be a utopia.
But socialism is
hampered.
hampered. They are hampered. Socialism is hampered by the weakness of the human race.
I don't think so.
Because
right now, as we see it now, people don't help each other because there's incentive to it. I mean, we have enough food to feed 11 billion people, and yet we only feed only 4 billion people have stable income of food. So that 7 billion, it's not that people are just there's someone who's unable to afford that food, and we're just not helping them. It's these people are being restricted of this food. It's being taken away from them and held away from them by capitalists. And there are people, and I mean, you can see this on the media.
A disproportionate wealth gap.
Not only that, but just, I mean, this whole market system, it's artificial. It's not like this is the natural way of an economy to function.
Oh, yeah.
It's being held up and enforced by the government. So if you took away the government, that's a good step towards taking away capitalism because it's artificially held up by the government. But I mean,
it's artificially held up by the currency of the government. Every other aspect of it is actually hindered by the government.
Not really, because I mean, when you have, how do you enforce that the capitalist controls the workplace? So that if you try to do it any other way, the capitalist calls the cops on you.
Wait. Explain that again. Sorry.
Well, I mean, say if you were, or a different example. I guess this is a better example. We have more houses than homeless people. Why is that? It's not because all these homeless people they're just too kind-hearted. It's not because there's some magical power enforcing property rights. It's the government. If a homeless person tried to go in a personless home, they get their shit pushed in by the government.
Well, yeah, because wait. If they try to enter someone else's home, is that what you just said?
If they enter an empty home.
Well,
like one that's not owned.
Well, okay, that goes to government overreach, but that's not capitalism. That's law enforcement.
Yeah,
no,
it's capitalism. It has to do with who controls the production of.
The houses are being produced by a company, and they're being set at a price that is not attainable by a homeless person.
Well, actually, a lot of the rundown properties are oftentimes foreclosed on and owned by the banks, in the sense that they are controlled by people who don't want people shooting up drugs because they become liable because of the government regulations. If there was a homeless guy that shot up in my property and then, I don't know, God forbid, got hurt, I'm liable for that. I don't need to be liable for that. That's government law. That's not.
The idea is that we don't have all these corporations that own hundreds of thousands of empty houses, though. They just don't own it anymore. It's not even that we don't take it away. We just stop allowing them to own it. We stop propping them up.
Well, then who's going to take it?
Homeless people. We'll put homeless people in there.
Okay, who's going to pay for it?
Nobody. The houses aren't going to go away.
Well, someone owes the bank money. The reason they're in that state is because the bank didn't get our money.
Take it from the bank.
Okay, who's going to pay the bank? Who's going to pay the bank?
Take it from them.
Who's going to take it from them? This is the government. This is the government.
No.
But
It's not that right. Maybe take it from them. Maybe take it from them. Maybe take it from them is the bad terminology to use. But they don't magically own it. It's not. There's no magic property fairy. It's the reason they own it is because the government enforces it. So if there is no government to enforce it, they don't own it.
Right. Which means the government would have to control it.
No, if the government stopped existing, they're not controlling it anymore.
If the government stopped existing, all those people that own those properties would knock them down.
And also, if the government didn't exist in its entirety, I think a lot worse things would happen.
Yeah, I think we don't just knock over
You know what would happen? You know what would happen?
My point is that
the property owner would walk in
natural.
with a gun and shoot every homeless person that was on that property.
That's kind of not that different from a government. It's still authoritarian.
Well, the government's not going to kill you because of it.
Well, I mean, if it gets to that point, they will.
See if this sounds appealing to
I mean,
either
if we're
of you.
talking about starving them to death, sure. But they're not going to walk in with a gun and be like, all right.
We're getting really esoteric here. My point is that, like, there's all these this property that they own. It's not. They don't magically own it. There's no fundamental force of nature that ties this property to them. They
pay taxes on it.
They own the property because there's some authority who says that they own it and will enforce.
You are not powerful unless the authority above you is giving you power. Which, in case the highest authority is the
property. Property comes from authority, and if we don't have that authority, or if that authority were to cease acting on it, then you don't have the property anymore.
It's for the same reason your country is not recognized unless you have a bigger country recognizing you.
All right, but let's run with your situation. Say the government doesn't exist, right?
Well, I think that might have been a bad example. I was being really literal there.
Okay.
I'm not saying we knock over the government immediately today.
Then, because you keep saying no. Well, no, because you keep saying we give it to them. Well, who's we?
I guess I misspoke because I'm giving you the wrong impression. It's not that we give it to them.
That's what I'm saying.
We stop enforcing these huge land barons
that's
claims
law.
on.
That's not economics. That's law.
I mean, it has to do with economics. It's the flow of property.
It's law, like the upheld of the law. There's a law that says you cannot be on someone else's property without their permission. There's a law that says that. It has nothing to do with economics. And whether or not I own the property or not, it's a law in the legal system that upholds that.
Yeah, like
because
you could be the richest person in history, and you are still under the law.
Because Jeff Bezos could have an abandoned warehouse property, whatever. We're going to use Jeff Bezos again. And he could say, yeah, you know what? Homeless people can live there. Sure, why not? All right, yeah, okay.
Okay.
You know, so...
But if there's a law that says
but
can't...
if he uses the law to say, no, you can't, then the government steps in. It has nothing to do with economics. Yeah, okay.
I mean, it does. Government and economics are intertwined. Capitalism and the government, they're both functions of the society that we live in. They're both socioeconomic systems.
Yes, but this goes back to like the gun-free zones in which they talk. I believe it was the court case about gun-free zones where they talk about. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Where they mentioned something about how infringing. A gun infringing on the rights of the students to learn has to do with economics, being that it will affect the future output of those children.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and that's obviously a clear and roundabout case. But I mean,
it's almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing. No, I mean, we're talking about the right to have a gun versus the right to own property. It's the same thing.
I don't think so because you can carry a gun on you. You can't carry a property on you. It's a distinction, I guess, between.
Yeah, but it's still a right. It's a right.
rights are ideals. They're not fundamental forces of nature. They
Yes,
have
but
to
if
do
you're
with
throwing
how
out rights of the United States government for a socialist system, that's un-American.
Well, okay.
I mean,
This is where you and
I
me
think
divide, Jack.
socialism is. Huh?
This is
I'll
where
let
me
John
and
speak on that.
all right. This is where me and Jack disagree on a lot of stuff. I do not care what is American and what isn't, because to me it makes no difference. What is efficient is efficient. If for some reason capitalism one day is just a failure, it fails, and socialism rises up to be the superior system, that is the system that I will use. However, like I have to specify that without enforcement, nothing will ever happen, because the group is too big to be unified on anything that formless. The idea of socialism or capitalism only works if there's enforcement or a massive reward for it. And
No,
the reward,
I agree. The
reward,
our sort of fundamental state as humans is to like hunt wildebeest and die in a hole die of
yeah,
malaria.
of course.
You need enforcement for everything. My point isn't so much that socialism is more natural; it's that capitalism isn't more natural. Especially in the United States, we have this idea that so capitalism is the natural state of being, and socialism is sort of enforced by the government, and that's come up around in this
I think
conversation too.
I think capitalism being in the more natural state is the exchange for a good, in the sense that whether you have money created by the federal government valued at a specific price versus just the simple exchange of product for product.
Well, there's a few things. A product for product in some sense is more natural, but also sort of sharing with your products with a small community is also more natural, which is how
Small community being your family.
Family or sort of an extended family, I guess, or
Right,
how it
that
might be
doesn't
more
mean the whole
applicable to.
country.
Yeah, of course. I don't think there's any communist who thinks that everything should be held in common with the entire country, because that just fundamentally wouldn't work. Especially what you see with anarchists, is they want to create what they call parallel structures, where they want to sort of unite a neighborhood in like a neighborhood. That's the sort of scale we're talking about here. A neighborhood in not necessarily even sharing anything yet, because that's not really feasible in 2020, but sort of instead of like relying on the police or the government for law enforcement, they will sort of help each other out in preventing crime.
Like a
And it's
gated
sort of
community type thing.
I don't want to say gated community,
Well,
because that
I
has
say gated community in the sense that it's like they have HOA fees, they all pay, for the swimming pool. That's obviously on a bigger scale, but as far as that goes, it's more of a simpler or more relatable.
I wouldn't even. I guess that's closer to it, but I wouldn't even say that, because it's sort of more like, oh, hey, dude, my friend, he, I don't know, it's fucking. I always return to food, because like your fundamental needs are
food,
like
water, shelter.
yeah, food. It's the easiest thing and like most relatable to the human brain. If your neighbor, they're low on food, or whatever, you go over and you help them and give them food. These sort of HOA fees, I guess they're a step closer to it, because it's a community helping each other out, but it's sort of it's like bureaucratic, if you know what I mean, where they're not all getting together to build a pool or whatever. They're like paying taxes in a sense, which isn't socialism or isn't working towards socialism.
Okay, so what happens? What happens when the neighbor that receives the food just keeps taking the food and doesn't go out of their way to provide for themselves, in which they come completely reliant on their neighbor and don't do anything for themselves?
Well, I don't think anyone's ever completely reliant. If you're doing that, you're not reliant on them. You're being an asshole. And in which case, you sort of get...
Yeah, so that's all the people on these government socialist programs.
Well, not government socialism.
Unemployment, food
that's
stamps.
not socialism. That's
yeah.
Unemployment is
Well, unemployment's
That's
a
not
different ballgame.
socialism. That's
Different
social
ballgame.
programs.
All these
Yeah,
government
they're-
handouts.
That's not government. Socialism is not when the government does stuff. That's not socialism. Those are social programs. Those are two different
Yeah.
things.
So,
Well,
like, socialism
anyway,
and
if you are-
communism, should, at least in your definition, should just completely exclude the government altogether.
Uh,
I believe that's
well, yeah,
just
I lean more to the anarchist. I lean more to the anarchist side of socialism and communism. So I would say yeah, but I mean, I don't think that
Well,
would
what-
be like a
Unified opinion.
yeah, I'd forget what the word because I'm baking right now. I think speaking of that, I think it's about time. I think we need to start wrapping this up
Yes.
because
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're at
I'm
we're at a 1 hour 30-minute runtime. So
Yeah.
I guess I
Really?
will.
I
Yes, we are.
Damn.
I guess I'll let us run with
Final
some
statement.
final statements if we. Do,
I think
please.
we've just become much more understanding of each other. At least I have.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so we'll start with Evan. Seeing that you are a guest,
Yes.
I'll let you get a final statement, and then we'll move to John.
My final statement is I'm not the most informed person. I consider myself informed, but I'm not the top dog. So if you're curious about socialism, you should go also look about people who are more into this, or even like read communist books and stuff like that, where they talk about what their goals are and stuff. Because I'm just a 19-year-old who has been only even only known what socialism is for about 2 years. I'm not even like an activist or anything.
All right,
All right.
John.
My opinion of socialism has changed slightly. Now understanding that itself is a divided take on what the world should look like. However, I feel like the function of socialism is to help the people who can't achieve their dreams in the same way that the already gifted can, or the already financially well off. I don't think that we need socialism to do that. But we can implement some functions into capitalism so that we can preserve both. Because there are less people that are rich and there are less people that are poor than there are people who are well off enough to go to the beach every weekend. So, socialism is a bit too radical for my taste. But I wouldn't mind taking some of its principles and applying them to the United States.
Okay. I guess I'll just leave it at this. Being that I am also a libertarian, constitutionalist, anti-government, hearing the word socialism to me sounds like government, and I don't like government. I also don't like forced charity. I think the best form of charity is actual charity, where it is purely based on the good of all, good of the people that do the charity. There are good people in this world, yes, and there are also some bad ones. I don't think forced charity helps the collective good. I think charity to people who need it, community-based charity knows what's best for their community, and like I always say, who needs a kick in the ass and who needs help. And I don't think the forcible charity of people is what we need. And I mean, I keep saying it, but it, to me, is giving up my liberty.
For the sake of someone you don't even know.
Yes. So, which, again, is what the United States is built upon. So, I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for watching the Two Sides of Politics podcast. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Evan, for coming on.
I hope it was fun.
We'll let
Thank
you
you for
go
having me.
before you die of a heat stroke.
Yeah. I feel my heart pounding, so I gotta get out of here.
Okay, all right. Thank
Yo.
you to Evan. Thank you to John, as always, and we will see you next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, per
you next
usual. But
Tuesday,
we'll
as
probably
they
be
say.
late, per usual. All right, thank you for watching. This has been the Two Sides Politics, a podcast.